Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Destiny, which is episode 15 of season 3 of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Deep Space Nine one episode at a time, and in this video I cover the third season episode, Destiny. So Destiny is the episode in which 3 Cardassian scientists come on board the station to try to open up communications relay through the wormhole that allows them to communicate through the wormhole. However, a Bajoran Vedic comes on the station prior to that, warning that a prophecy foretells that these Cardassians coming will lead to the wormhole being destroyed. And this is just his wild interpretation of the prophecy, and Sisko and Kira at first dismiss this prophecy out of hand as being ridiculous, and so they continue working with the Cardassian scientists until more and more parts of the prophecy start to come true. For example, the prophecy tells of a sword of stars. They then come across a comet, and which could be described as a sword of stars. Sisko gets very uncomfortable with Kira mentioning the prophecy, and she mentions the fact that he's the emissary, and he's very uncomfortable with that, but she has to admit that's how she sees him, as a religious icon. But he tries to come up with a real concrete reason why to cancel the mission, and Kira tries to give him one, but he warns that the prophecy is just vague and they can't go off of that. However, when they try to operate the communications relay, something goes terribly wrong, and it causes the comet to change course and go directly into the wormhole, and that will destroy it. So it seems like that part of the prophecy is coming true. So O'Brien comes up with an ingenious way to destroy the comet with the phaser by doing it all at once. However, one of the scientists is actually an agent of the Obsidian Order, and she sabotages the phasers so that it doesn't destroy the comet evenly. Instead, it breaks it up into 3 fragments, which are on course to destroy the wormhole still. And so Sisko and Kira come up with the plan to use a shuttlecraft to put a sort of technobabble bubble around the comet fragments as they go through the wormhole in order to protect the wormhole from them so it doesn't destroy them. But what they end up doing is opening the wormhole just a microsecond, a wedge, just enough for communications to work perfectly. And so Sisko and Kira determined that the prophecy did in fact come true. It was just misinterpreted by the Vedic, that the 3 vipers were referring to the 3 comet fragments, and when it said the celestial temple will burn and forever be open, or be unable to close ever again, it was actually talking about the communications relay. So they said that the prophecy was in fact correct. It was just widely misinterpreted, and the episode ends with Sisko having a conversation with the Vedic saying, "Tell me some more prophecies about the emissary." So I think this is another one of those episodes that I didn't record off the TV when I first watched it. So I think I did see this one, or maybe I started recording it and the tape ran out and I just never recorded it again. It's one of those episodes I hadn't seen repeatedly. So it always seems a bit less familiar to me, and also, I don't know, it just seems like a forgettable episode. Like, I just often forget that this episode exists. I don't think it's particularly bad. I just don't think it's particularly memorable either. However, there is one thing I will say that this episode is noteworthy for. This is the first episode in which Sisko is treated as the emissary, and the emissary is treated as an important religious icon. So you might be like, well, what are you talking about, Mark? The emissaries was mentioned in the pilot episode. I mean, that's the freaking name of the pilot episode, Emissary. And then every once in a while, Vedic Wynn will come on board and refer to him as Emissary. Here's the thing about that. They never specifically say what the emissary is or what it means exactly. And more importantly, they never imply that it's an important religious icon. Like, towards the end of the show, they'll kind of imply that the emissary is like a Jesus figure. And I would say that is definitely not what they're implying in all the episodes before this one. I will say that this episode and going forward a little bit, he's more like an important prophet, like Moses or something, or John or whatever. I don't know. I'm not that familiar with the Bible, but not as high up as Jesus, but fairly important, known figure. And I think even that was a retcon. See, here. All right, let me get specifically in what I think is retconned. So in this episode, they mentioned that there's a lot of prophecies about the emissary. And Kira mentions, I had to hide the fact that it's difficult for me to work for the emissary. All that's retconned, I think. Because none of that is even implied earlier on. What I think is implied, and what I got out of the episode Emissary, is that there was a prophecy, kind of like one in this episode, where someone got a hold of an orb, and they had a vision of the future, and they had a vision of a person discovering the celestial temple, the wormhole. And so basically what they were having a vision of is Sisko and Dax traveling through the wormhole and discovering the wormhole. And so they foretold that in the prophecy, and of course they didn't know them by name, and probably didn't recognize them as aliens. They thought, these are just weird people. And so, since he didn't know his name was Benjamin Sisko, he gave him a name, the Emissary. Because he's the emissary, he discovers the wormhole, so he's the emissary to the prophets. And so, Kaiopaka interprets his prophecies and perhaps has visions of her own through seeing the orb, and then realizes when she meets Sisko, ironic, one who does not wish to be among us is to be the emissary. So, what she's referring to as the emissary is the person who discovered the wormhole. And that's where it ends. It's not this prophet, where there's tons of different prophets about it. It's not a huge religious icon. It's just the Bajoran name, their religion's name, for the person who discovers the wormhole. That's it. That is totally what I got out of that first episode. And every episode after that, when Vedic Win, who to my knowledge, if I remember correctly, is the only person before this episode who ever called him the emissary, other than Kaiopaka, of course. The only person that mentions it. Although, like, Baral will say it in passing, is like, they fear you as the emissary who walked with the prophets. But he doesn't directly refer to him as emissary by name, the way that Vedic Win does. But even so, when Vedic Win is calling him emissary, she's just saying, you are the person who discovered the wormhole. And when Vedic Baral says that, they fear you as the emissary who walked with the prophets, meaning he went into the wormhole and talked to the wormhole aliens and got the wormhole aliens to keep the wormhole open. But they wouldn't use those language to describe what happened. That's Starfleet language. Because of their religion, they would use their religious language, that he's the emissary who went into the celestial temple and walked with the prophets. But they're essentially just describing what Starfleet would describe as going into the wormhole and negotiating with the wormhole aliens. They just see it from a religious perspective. But that's all he ever was. And when they call him emissary, it's just a name for the person who discovered the wormhole. That's all it is. And that's all it was. This episode is the first episode that changes that. This episode creates it so that he has a whole bunch of prophecies about him. They bring up this one in the episode, and they mention others at the end. Benjamin's, tell me all these other things. And Kira talks about how difficult it is to work for a religious icon. And when she says that, I feel it's not like earlier episodes when she's saying the person who went into the wormhole and negotiated with the wormhole aliens, who to her are her gods, so she would place it as the emissary who walked with the prophets. But when she says it, I get the feeling that's when they morphed it, that she's no longer saying, you negotiated with the wormhole aliens. She's saying, You are in a lot of religious texts. You are a religious figure in my religion. That's a retcon. That's a change. And of course, these changes will only progressively get bigger and bigger and bigger until we get to season 7, when all of a sudden he's a fucking god. that the prophets purposely arranged his birth so that he could arrange his existence so that he could come meet with the prophets. Now that is a gigantic retcon. But I will say, like, it starts here. This is where it starts. But it just builds and builds and builds and builds. I think the next episode that will build and make him an even bigger deal is the 4th season episode Ascension. And then after that is the episode Rapture, where by then he's like, God, I wish I knew religion better. He was like a well-known Moses figure. He's like a huge, like, prophet. Pardon the tongue, like, not Wormhole alien, but you know what I mean. He's like a huge figure in the original, and then by the time you get to season 7, he's fucking Jesus. He's the Bajoran Jesus, and that's absolutely 100%. I guarantee you, in the first 3 seasons before this episode, all it meant was he's the guy that found the wormhole. That's it. That's all Emissary ever meant. Not, this huge religious icon. So it starts here, and it balloons and balloons and gets way worse. So this is the beginning of the whole Emissary mythology. Not Emissary, because that just refers to the dude who discovered the wormhole. This is, he's a prophet now. First time. And I don't know how I feel about it. I remember I was caught off guard by it when I first saw this. Like, here's what I don't like about the retcon. I think it definitely gets worse. Like, the whole thing about, your mother, like, that totally changes the whole nature of the prophets. But anyway, we'll get to there. But here's what I don't like about this episode. The biggest part of this retcon I don't buy is Kira's saying, I've always found it difficult to work with the Emissary, and I never really realized that, and I just internalized it, and now I'm finding it that, that you're the Emissary. Bullshit. Sorry. There's no way. There's no way. I mean, they try to hide this and excuse it by saying, I never really realized it before, and I internalized it, but no, bullshit. This is total bullshit. He was never a prophet. He was never a huge religious icon. I mean, maybe an icon in terms of symbolic of it's important that he's the one that discovered the wormhole, which to them is a religious symbol, a religious place with their gods live there. So that simply discovering the wormhole makes him kind of important in the religion. But what she's saying here goes beyond that. And no, don't buy it. But that aside, I think the storyline with the prophecy was actually kind of interesting. It's an interesting sort of play on things, and I like how I think it's a good Kira and Sisko episode, because we don't really, I think in later seasons, we don't really get that much of this, captain first officer combo. They're usually off doing their separate things, and sometimes they're like professional, and they're just like, doing the simple, ordinary administrative tasks, like, did you have that ship dock and whatever. But I like episodes that actually get into their relationship, to the command structure. The kind of relationship that Riker and Picard had, or Chakotay and Janeway had. I feel like we don't get that many episodes that really play on the Sisko and Kira thing. Like, it started in, like, who was that episode with the grumpy old man? Progress, and then progressed, and duet, and then the Circle trilogy. But I feel like after season 2, they didn't really touch on it that much. I do appreciate it. And I think it is interesting getting the 2 points of view where Kira is like, look, I know you don't believe in the religious stuff, but, the prophets or wormhole aliens, however you want to call them, exist outside of time, so it's plausible that they sent this knowledge of the future to someone 3,000 years ago and he wrote it down in the prophecy. And Sisko, is open to that. It's like, okay, that's true, but just because it's couched in metaphor and it's vague, so even if that's true, that we could be wildly misinterpreting it. And he was correct. That the prophecy was in fact true, but they were wildly misinterpreting that. And I think, and the sort of meeting of the heads, the way that the two of them work together and to resolve the situation. I love seeing Sisko and Kira go off in the shuttlecraft together and sort of solve the working together to solve the problem. I like that, so I think that's good. Now, as for the Cardassian scientists, I think it's interesting because we never really... we got Natima in that one episode, Profit and Loss, which sucked. But other than that, we never really get to see Cardassian women that much. And also, not just women, but also civilians, basically. Not military. They're scientists. And it was interesting getting that different perspective. And... yes, it was kind of obvious that the third one who came was from the Obsidian Order. She was obviously being very standoff and different every time that she spoke. The other ones were like, oh, and like being sort of standoffish against her. So it wasn't that they didn't really do much with it. Oh, she sabotaged. It was just a plot device. Oh, she sabotaged the phaser. That way we have to go in and do this thing. But apparently it was meant to happen. Prophecy foretold this. But I love this sort of diplomatic thing with the Cardassian scientists and the way, like that one scene when they first got there and they said all this official, oh, we're looking forward to working with the Federation, thank you, and thank you, blah blah blah. And they're like, okay, now that the formality's over, and they start talking candidly. I was contacted by 20 goals and I was practicing my speeches the whole way over here. Like, that was like a really nice touch, and it was really interesting seeing Cardassians who are not just bullies and military assholes working with Sisko and the crew and getting along with Major Kira. Like when she says specifically, like, I thank you, Major, because if the Bajoran, the high-ranking Bajoran on the station didn't want us to come, we know that we wouldn't be able to come. And she felt kind of humbled by that. Like, she can get along with Cardassians. She's already had experiences with Maritza and what's-his-face, Gamor, so he's gotten along with Cardassians before, but still, you could tell that she was kind of caught off guard by that. And I think it was nice. I think that's good character interactions. Now, as for the thing with O'Brien and the misunderstanding, I don't know, like... I don't really... it seems kind of cliche, like a sci-fi cliche, that O'Brien's like being a dick to her, and she interprets that, he's into me. He wants to marry me now because he's so into me, because he's being a dick, because that's Cardassian culture. First of all, it's nothing to indicate that's how Cardassian culture works. Granted, we don't know a whole lot about Cardassian culture, particularly when it comes to women, but I don't know. They still never said anything remotely close to indicate that. But, okay, you can excuse it for that. But it just seems kind of cliche. It seems like something like sci-fi does all the time. I feel like I've seen that story like many other places where they have an alien and the guy's a dick and they're like, oh, you're really into me, It just, I don't know. It just doesn't seem that original. And it was also the scene where she comes on to O'Brien was kind of clunky, where she's like, oh, I assure you, I'm quite fertile. And he like bumps his head. Like, I will admit it's kind of funny, but in a sort of obvious way. It's like, it's very obvious that they're, oh, look at this joke. Isn't this funny? I don't know why she's talking about, like, fertilization already. Like, wouldn't she? I don't know. Is that how Cardassians work? They just go straight to having kids and not even go out to dinner first? Could be. I don't know. But I don't know. It just seemed off. It just seemed weird. And then, but I did like when O'Brien's like, I'm not even remotely attracted to you. And then, of course, she's like, oh, what the fuck? And then he's like, oh, no, I mean, you're really attractive. You're a really nice girl. It's just, and he's like, yeah, whatever. And like that felt like a real moment too. It didn't feel like O'Brien kind of put his foot in his mouth because he just like spoke without thinking. Oh God, I don't even find you remotely attractive. And then he realized what a dick he was being. It's like, oh shit. And but I actually thought it was kind of lovely at the end when they worked together to resolve the situation, and she kissed him on the cheek and said, what's your wife's name? Keiko. Keiko's a very lucky woman. Like that I thought was sweet. I thought that was a sweet thing to do. A sweet sort of storyline. O'Brien, it's kind of, there's a subtle subtext because we know that O'Brien's kind of racist. Speciesist, if you would, if you prefer, towards Cardassians, and so there's kind of a subtext that's part of why he was like so rejecting of her at first, but then sort of learned to sort of appreciate her and learned to appreciate what a great engineer she was. And so by the end, when she said that to him, I think he was very receptive to it. I think he was very flattered by that. Like, and you see him walking away kind of chipper. It's like, oh, see, I'm a good guy. This chick's kind of into me, even though I'm not going to do anything about it. It's still flattering. So, so it's kind of, I think, gave him a kind of new perspective on Cardassians and learned to sort of be more open and less racist towards them. Kind of more open-minded, had a good experience with Cardassians, just like Kira had a good experience with the Cardassians in this episode. So I think those episodes were good in that regard. The guy who plays the Vedic, who says the prophecy, is I've seen that actor a billion times before. He was in Stargate, and apparently someone mentioned that Stargate just came out a year before this episode. I didn't realize they were so close together. And he's been in a bunch of other shit. I can't even remember. Was he on Seinfeld? I'm pretty sure he was, but I've seen this guy everywhere. But anyway, it was, yeah. He's a good actor. He did a good job in this role, too. I think the whole thing, though, about when Odo was saying, oh, he got kicked out as a Vedic, he's not a Vedic anymore because he was disrupting a Cardassian peace treaty. He was very much against it. I don't think that's relevant or that was necessary. Like, why have that scene? I guess to sort of cast out and say, oh yeah, he's definitely an idiot. He's definitely full of shit. There's no prophecy. Maybe that's why, I guess. I don't know. I don't think it particularly adds anything to the episode. But, yeah. So, I talk about in TNG and now in Voyager a lot about how there's always a episode where you got an A plot with a character story and a B plot is some anomaly bullshit. Well, DS9, we had a couple of episodes like that in season 1, but maybe one in season 2, I can't remember. But later seasons, I was clear that they never do that. But what they do, in fact, I think they only do this twice, to my recollection. But instead of having, like, weird anomaly bullshit, they'll have people come on board to do experiments on the wormhole. That's the other thing. So that's what they do in this episode. They have, they're going to open a communications array through the wormhole. And then in the episode Rejoined, it's about trying to create another wormhole. And then, I guess you could say in season 2 they had the episode where they're doing the terraforming thing, but that has nothing to do with the wormhole. But still, I guess creating another wormhole also doesn't really have anything to do with the wormhole except trying to create one. I don't know. But it seems like rather than anomaly bullshit, it's running experiments. That's their thing. But even then, like, as I say, I don't think they do it that much. Like, from this point on, I can only think of this episode and Rejoined. I'll have to, I think there might have been another episode when they did some experiments on the wormhole. I don't remember. But yeah, I don't think it's as bad, by the way. I mean, it's kind of like throwaway because we don't really care about the communications array. And, yeah, It wasn't the Delta Flyers because I'm ahead of them now. Sad face. I think it was a different podcast I was listening to that was saying, oh yeah, this never comes up again. It does, in fact, come up again. That they can communicate through the wormhole. I don't remember when exactly. Well, I know they mentioned it in season 5 in the, what's that episode called? In Purgatory's Shadow? Because they mentioned that when the Dominion fleet's about to invade the Alpha Quadrant, they mentioned, oh, we lost contact with our thing in the Gamma Quadrant. So it's clear that they have an outpost, like a communications relay in the Gamma Quadrant, and they lost contact with it. And again, like, I think that same podcast was questioning why the hell the Dominion wasn't there, why are they letting them put up this satellite right on the other side of the wormhole. But I talked about this before. And I'm still 100% set in my ways. I'm certain, even though it's never stated in the show itself, I am positive the Dominion space is nowhere near the wormhole. Now, granted, once they found out about the wormhole, they could have made Dominion space closer to, like, they could have went and conquered the wormhole, which seemed like it might have been prudent to do. But they didn't, for whatever reason. Maybe because they want to continue spying on the Federation, so they want them to travel back and forth through the wormhole so they can use that to send their spies with them. That's my guess. But for whatever reason, like as I said in that season 5 episode, that's when they conquered the other side of the wormhole. But if you notice, that's when we stopped going to Gamma Quadrant, period. Because then Sisko mines the wormhole, and then the prophets make it so no one can go through the wormhole. So we stopped going to the Gamma Quadrant then. So up until we stopped going to the Gamma Quadrant, the Dominion was nowhere near the wormhole. But because I think the espionage things make sense. That's why they didn't conquer it. But once they were ready to go full force in the Alpha Quadrant, there was no point in the pretext, so they went ahead and conquered that side of the wormhole. Makes total sense to me. I don't have an issue with it. I'm perfectly fine with it. And it also makes complete and total sense to me that they would want a communications relay on the other side of the wormhole, because as they said, because they are continuing to go in it, as stupid as we might think that is, I think they should just collapse it. If the Dominion are that big of a threat, collapse the wormhole. And if you think, oh, they don't want to hurt the prophets. Well, they mentioned in season 5 there's a way to do it without hurting the prophets. So do that. You should have done that. But anyway. No, we want to keep exploring, even though we know this is huge, gigantic, dangerous empire on the other side. But whatever. For whatever reason, they decided they want to keep going in the Gamma Quadrant. So it makes sense that they have a communications array. And one of the reasons why they state why it's a good thing to have the communications array is to warn them in case Dominion is coming, which seems extremely smart to me. Just saying. And yeah, I'm going to reinforce what I said about the Dominion. The reason why they didn't stake out like the other side of the wormhole is because that's a prelude to invasion. And they're not ready for whatever reason. They want to do more recon or whatever, and they're not ready to invade. So if they do that, then they're ready to invade. And they're completely cutting off passage to the other side of the wormhole. Therefore, Federation has no reason to keep the wormhole open. Seems to make sense to me. Anyway, I would now like to thank my Patreon supporters for supporting me on Patreon. It's very much appreciated. It does help me continue with the channel. I'd like to give a big special thanks to Brandon Nilhouse, Jordan Johnson, and Antarius. Thank you all so very, very much for your strong support. We have a few patron, before we get the comments, sorry, I'd also like to shout out Tyler Cease, Benjamin Mead, Greg Marley, Francisco, Chuck Hooks, Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky, Matty Jester, Joel Valls, Alessandro Migalacio, Norman Buchwald, Stephen Kennedy, Brittenberg, and Allison Fordyce. Thank you all so very, very much for your support. Now, get to the Patreon comments. First comment is from Kyrie091, who says, Destiny, more like Mestiny. You got me, Mark. I don't remember this one. You got to tell me how I feel about it. On a scale of from 1 to endgame, How do you rate it? Well, okay, so on a scale of 1 to Endgame, I rate it as I have had enough of you! That's how I rate it. And I think that's how you rate it. Oh, by the way, how you think of this episode? You love it! You love this episode. It's better than Vic Fontaine. It's like watching Vic Fontaine singing, I'll be loving you in all the familiar places. Like, you'd much rather watch this episode than that. That is how much you love this episode. Anyway, next comment is from Stephen Kennedy, who says, I would have loved to see O'Brien in a relationship with a Cardassian female. It's a shame he's married to Keiko, a relationship that I like. I have this image of Molly as a half Cardassian, half human, running around the station telling everyone to feck off. Talking about this, should some certain character be half Bajoran, half human? This is a good episode. So my rating is 7 prophecies that come true in the land of fairies and magic out of 10. It might be interesting. It might have been interesting to see O'Brien hook up with Cardassian. Although having a half Cardassian, half human kid, I don't know. I don't think that's necessary. I mean, we get Zial later on as half Bajoran, half Cardassian. Anyway, next comment is from Ricky, who says, this episode was pretty good. I actually liked how this episode played into a bank ran prophecy, but at first it was misinterpreted, and then by the end of the episode it was actually in favor of the Cardassians. And also I like that these Cardassians were scientists and once again go against the stereotypes of a species. To me, that was always a flaw within Star Trek, by portraying every alien race the same instead of being more diverse. That's the word. Diversified. Yeah, that's that word. Also, I really love the Sisko moments in the show and the interchange of dialogue between him and Kira regarding Sisko being the emissary, and how does Kira feel about that. Once again, great character writing in this season, so my rating is an 8 out of 10. I agree. Great character writing. Absolutely. For sure. And I also like the going against the stereotypes. Although I will say they've already done this for Cardassians a couple times with like Profit and Loss and Second Skin with the whole dissident movement thingy. But it's always good to see like scientists. Like, they don't have to be dissidents. They can just be normal scientists. I like that. So anyway, next comment is from Antarius, who says, I really like that they revisit Sisko's role as the emissary and show him changing attitude towards Bajoran religion and his own part in it. Also, I like that the way guest characters are portrayed. Vedic Yarka is not simply an evil fanatic, and the scientists are not your stereotypical Cardassians. I have the feeling that the storyline between O'Brien and Galora was included as filler. Next week on DS9, Morn finally recovers from drinking bad Kanar and promptly returns to Quark's bar. My rating is an 8 out of 10. Oh yeah! That's right, Morn. I always forget to talk about Morn. Morn drank the bad Kanar and ended up in the infirmary. I love how they just casually said that because we saw Quark earlier having bad Kanar. And, I was thinking to myself, like, does the alcohol go off? Doesn't it usually last forever? But then I remember, I think it was like 2010 when I was living in New Zealand. I came to visit my parents and for like a couple weeks, and they had a couple of these bottles of alcohol that they never drink at all. So they're like, you can take them back to New Zealand with you. So I put them in my suitcase, packed them, carried them back to the whole rigmarole, took them back to the country, and once I arrived in New Zealand, I went to drink it, and it was completely off. it was like totally just goo. But that was a liqueur. So it was Cointreau, which is quite an expensive orange liqueur. So that might be why. Maybe if it was like scotch or something, it would have been fine. But so maybe the Canar is actually a liqueur. It has some sort of fruit in it that can go off. Maybe. I don't really know anything about anything. I'm just guessing. I don't know. So next comment is from Norman Buckwald, who says, so the prophets apparently failed to provide a connection to what the three vipers may mean, that soon the locusts will be coming, LOL. Seriously, this is a good episode about Bajoran fate, explores a bit more of Sisko's status as the emissary, and the Cardassian women scientists definitely added a lot of texture to Cardassian culture, including O'Brien suffering mildly, with one of them thinking that he's coming on to her and wants to mate with her. Lots of good stuff. I will give it 8 listening posts out of 10. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think it's really up to this prophecy to foretell the coming Dominion invasion. Like, that's a separate prophecy. Like, this is just focusing on this time period, and there's a different prophecy that focuses on another time period, or at least that's how I see it. It kind of makes sense to me. But as far as O'Brien suffering, like, I don't know. I wouldn't call this O'Brien Must Suffer episode. Like, I think someone coming on to you is not really suffering. I mean, yeah, it's a bit uncomfortable and it was a bit embarrassing, but it's also flattering, as you said. And it ended kind of nicely, but I do get what you mean, though, because this is the writer's same tendency to always be like, oh, let's put O'Brien in uncomfortable situations, ha 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 ha. Yeah, so it is that same tendency. I totally agree with you there. Anyway, thank you, patrons, so much for your comments. So my rating for Destiny, I was almost going to call it Prophecy. I keep forgetting the name of this episode too. My rating for Destiny out of 10 is going to be a 7. Very good. I was thinking about giving it an 8, but this is such a forgettable episode. Like, I don't think it quite deserves an 8, just because, I mean, it's good. There's nothing terrible about it. Like, I like the prophecy's interesting. The Bajoran characters the Cardassian characters are interesting. And the Sisko-Kira interaction's good. It's just not very memorable. I mean, having the side plot about the communications relay is kind of forgettable. And, yeah, the prophecy storyline is somewhat interesting, but it's not, like, big. It's not like really amazing. Oh my god, what a great storyline. It's fine. So this episode's fine. But yeah, and the whole thing with the emissary thing, yeah, it's retconned. It is retconned. This is the first episode where they treat the emissary like a huge, like, religious symbol icon who is actively involved. That's the difference I'm looking for. Because before this episode, he wasn't actively involved. He was just the person who discovered the wormhole. Now he's actively involved in all the prophecies and an active symbol who has roles in society. That will be developed later. But it starts here. Anyway, so that is it for my review of Destiny. So if you enjoyed this review, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe. You can leave a comment below. Let me know what you thought of this episode. And if you really would like to support my channel, you can do so by supporting me on Patreon. There's a link in that description below there. I have different rewards, different tiers. I have a Patreon-only video series that I do exclusively for Patreon supporters where I revisit reviews that I have already done. So yeah. Let's see now what's coming up on my channel. So Monday will be my review for Severance Season 2. Looking forward to that. What a great show. Wednesday, I'll be reviewing the Voyager episode The Cloud. Thursday, I'll be reviewing the Deep Space Nine episode Profit Motive. Going back to the wormhole, finally seeing the wormhole aliens again, just so they can do some Ferengi nonsense. So Mileage may vary on that episode. And then on Saturday, I'll be over on Patreon for a Patreon exclusive video revisiting my review for Eye of the Needle. So that's what's coming up on my channel. Be sure to check it out as I continue to cover Star Trek Deep Space Nine and Star Trek Voyager and many other Star Trek videos and many other videos and many other shows as well. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.